The wind swept across the Kasara plains in hot, heavy waves, carrying dust, brittle grass, and the scent of something older than time. The sun hung low, glaring down upon the cracked earth like a silent sentinel. It was August, the height of the dry season, and everything in the reserve moved slower. Even the trees seemed to bow, weary from weeks without rain. Dr. Emily Hart knelt beside a half-collapsed watering hole near the southern boundary of the reserve, adjusting the telemetry collar on a dick that had wandered too far into grazing zones. Sweat clung to her neck under her khaki collar. Her hands moved with practiced care. Clean, precise, calm. She had spent years like this, in forests thick as soup, mountains that swallowed helicopters whole, wetlands where insects ruled, but Kasara Plains was different. Here, life wore no disguise. It lived in plain sight. And it bled just as openly. A gust of wind rolled in from the east. Emily froze. That wasn't just wind. It was layered, a sound beneath the air. Not a lion's roar, nor a hyena's laugh. It was a low, guttural rumble, broken and strained. A guttural cry, from something large, and in pain. She rose instantly, grabbing her radio. "Daniel, this is Emily. Did anyone report unusual movement east of Point 11? A crackle, then Daniel's voice. Deep and steady. "Negative. But we picked up spoor near the Tanzanian line. Cat. Possibly leopard." "Why?" Emily was already moving. "I heard something. South-southeast. Close. I'm checking it." Daniel paused. "Be careful, Em. It's the kind of heat that makes predators twitchy." "I know." The grass thinned where the old poacher trails crossed the reserve's edge, a place rangers patrolled daily, but never relaxed around. Poachers had become smarter in recent months. Traps were better hidden, snares more lethal, bait fresher. Animals limped out of the brush with steel twisted around their limbs or never came out at all. As she stepped through a gap between two scorched acacia trees, the wind shifted again. She smelled it first. Blood. Fresh. Then she saw it. A shape sprawled in the grass, half covered by dry stalks. Emily stopped. A leopard, a male. Large, muscles carved beneath his dappled coat, lay motionless except for the rise and fall of his flanks. His right foreleg was splayed unnaturally, a jagged steel snare biting into the flesh just above the joint. Blood darkened the earth beneath him. She took one slow step forward. His head lifted. Their eyes met. Gold. Not the simple shine of an animal, but fire behind it. Not madness. Not rage. Recognition. Then a sound. A low, ragged growl. Her hand moved instinctively toward her belt. Not for a weapon. She didn't carry one. Only gloves. Gauze. Antiseptic. Saline. Behind her, Daniel's voice burst through the radio again. "Em, I just picked something up on the scanner. You're near something big. Get back, now." She lifted the receiver, eyes never leaving the cat. "I found him." "What?" "A male leopard. Wounded. Snared. Deep wound on the front leg. Possibly septic." A pause. Then, sharp. "Emily, do not approach. I'm 10 minutes out." That thing will tear you apart if you get too close." She clicked the radio off. She already knew. And she also knew she couldn't wait. She stepped closer, slow, deliberate. Each footfall pressed into the dry earth with barely a sound. The leopard's eyes tracked her, unblinking. His ears were half-folded. Not in aggression, in exhaustion. His growl had faded, but his breathing was quick. "Hey," she said softly, kneeling 5 feet away. "You're in a bad spot. Aren't you?" The leopard didn't move. She could see the snare now. A cruel wire wrapped multiple times around the limb. Biting into flesh, now swollen and raw. Flies buzzed at the wound's edge. The leg twitched. Blood still leaked in pulses. "All right, big guy," she whispered. "We don't have long." She slid her pack onto the ground. The leopard's ears twitched. When her hands moved again, she pulled out a syringe, fast-acting sedative. Low dose. She didn't want to knock him out completely. Just enough to slow his reactions. It was risky. Everything was. But this was the job. This was her calling. She crawled another foot closer. The leopard gave a soft rumble. But it wasn't a warning. It was a reply. A weary one. She eased forward, breathing with him, matching his rhythm. When she finally reached his side, she moved in a practiced blur, needle into flank. Squeeze. Retract. His body tensed, then softened. 1 minute. 2. He stopped watching her. His breath deepened. Emily touched his fur gently. It was warm, coarse at the edges, softer near the belly. His leg twitched once as she brought out her tools. First the bolt cutter. It took all her strength to snip the wire. Once, twice, 3 times, the steel finally sprang loose, revealing the full damage. Deep laceration, swelling, pus, signs of necrosis just beginning. But treatable, if fast. She flushed the wound with antiseptic, applied a thick poultice, then wrapped the leg with pressure gauze. She worked quickly but methodically, every second counting. By the time Daniel and the Rangers arrived, she was already bandaging. They skidded to a stop. Rifles slung but unused. "Jesus, Emily," Daniel breathed. "You're insane." She looked up, hands bloody but calm. "He didn't move. He let me." "He let you?" Emily nodded once. Daniel stepped closer and knelt beside her, eyeing the leopard with awe. "You know who this is?" he said softly. She blinked. "No. Should I?" Daniel gestured at the scar along the leopard's left flank. "That's Juma." The name stirred something faint in Emily's memory, a whisper in a report, a footnote in an old file. Juma, the ghost of Kasara. He's the one who escaped the traps 3 times. The one who used to circle the ranger camps at night but never attacked. No one's seen him close in over 2 years. Emily looked down at the leopard again, at the stillness in his chest. The rise and fall that matched her breath. He wasn't a ghost now. He was broken, but alive. They brought him back in the medic transport cage. It took hours to stabilize him, and longer still to coax him to trust the safe space they had created in the shaded enclosure behind the station. Emily refused to leave his side. And the leopard, Juma, never took his eyes off her. He watched her work, watched her move, not with fear, not with fury, but with something else, something almost human, recognition. And so, under the dry August sun in a place scorched by drought and threatened by men with snares and greed, something rare began. Not a rescue, not yet, but something far more fragile. A moment, a choice, a shared breath between species, forged in blood and silence. A cry in the wind, answered. The days after the rescue blurred into a rhythm of quiet tension and delicate trust. Juma was housed in a reinforced but open-roofed enclosure behind the Kasara Plains field station, shaded by broad canvas and acacia branches. Surrounded by layered fences, not to trap him, but to protect him while he healed. He didn't pace or snarl like other wildcats brought in. He watched, always watched. He let no one near, except Emily. It wasn't compliance. It wasn't submission. It was recognition. On the third evening, under the long gold shadows of a setting sun, Emily knelt beside the enclosure, clipboard forgotten on the ground. As she unwrapped the dressing on Juma's front leg, the swelling had started to reduce, the angry redness fading. He didn't growl, he didn't flinch. Instead, as her fingers brushed his side, he shifted his weight, not away from her, but toward her, slightly exposing his belly. She froze. It wasn't an act of aggression. It was a gesture. She leaned closer, heart caught in her throat. And then she saw it. A scar. Thin, pale, just below the ribs. She reached out instinctively, brushing her fingertips over the old mark. Not new. Not recent. He tensed but didn't withdraw. Her breath caught that shape. That curve. It wasn't just a scar. It was the scar. 6 years ago, a different time, a younger version of herself, fresh out of veterinary school, still stiff with nerves but bursting with idealism, had volunteered on a rotating mission through the Eastern Corridor project near Mount Kilimanjaro. A poaching hotspot. She had only been there 2 months when a call came in about a leopard cub found tangled in a snare trap near a poacher's campsite. She remembered that day like it had happened in another life. The cub had been young, barely more than a handful of muscle and fire. He had tried to bite through the wire himself, injuring his stomach in the process. She had sedated him, cleaned the wound, stitched it as best she could with trembling hands. For 5 days, she stayed beside him in the makeshift clinic tent, feeding him, checking vitals, singing softly when he growled in his sleep. She had named him Juma, meaning born on Friday, because that was the day he had come into her care. And then, as quickly as he had entered her life, he had been released. The rules had been clear. No imprinting, no prolonged captivity. He was returned to the wild. She had cried that night. Not just for him, but for the truth no one had prepared her for. That sometimes, saving something means letting it go before you're ready. And now, she sat before a grown leopard. Silent, strong, scarred. The same scar. The same eyes. Her hand shook as she touched the scar again. Softer this time. Juma. The name left her lips in barely more than a breath. But he heard it. His golden eyes shifted, blinking slowly, a feline acknowledgement. He didn't growl. He didn't bare his teeth. He watched her. And in that moment, something ancient and unspoken passed between him, a tether drawn across time. Loss, memory, a homecoming neither of them had expected. Behind her, someone cleared their throat. She turned. Daniel stood by the gate. Arms crossed, brows drawn together, not in anger, but wonder. "You said his name," he said quietly. She nodded, voice thick. "He remembers it." Daniel took a slow step forward. Cautious, respectful. "I've worked with a lot of big cats," he said, "even ones rescued young. They don't come back like this. They don't let us close again." Emily looked at Juma, who had now lowered his head to his paws but kept one eye open, tracking their every movement. "He's different," she whispered. Daniel crouched beside her. "You knew him?" She nodded again. "I treated him. Years ago. He was a cub, hurt by a snare just like this time. I held him in my arms. You gave him his name." Daniel murmured, more statement than question. Emily exhaled, a fragile smile on her lips. "I did." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the leopard breathe, slow, even, almost at peace. "You think he came back here on purpose?" Daniel finally asked. "I don't know," she replied, "but I do know this. He had the whole of the Kasara wilds to disappear into. He's survived this long, smart, elusive. He chose to walk near humans again." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then maybe it wasn't a mistake." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. The wind blew restless outside, whispering through the plains, tossing dust into the corners of the compound. She lay in her cot, staring at the dark ceiling, replaying everything: the first rescue, the soft growls, the moments of quiet between them when nothing needed to be said. Her childhood dream had always been to save animals. She never imagined one might come back to save her from forgetting why she started. By morning, Juma was on his feet again, limping, but moving. He paced the enclosure with strength in his spine, testing the leg. Emily observed from a corner, notebook in hand, but he paid her no mind, not with distrust, but with comfort. She was part of his space now. Later that day, she updated the central team. "He's stabilizing, the wound's healing, appetite strong, behavior alert but not aggressive. I'd recommend full release evaluation within the next 10 days. Already?" One of the conservationists asked on the comms. "A wild leopard. And he lets you touch him?" There was hesitation in the voice. "You sure he's safe?" Emily glanced toward the enclosure. Juma lay in the far corner, watching her, tail flicking slowly. "He's wild," she said, "but not unsafe." There was a pause. "And you trust him?" "I do. And more importantly," she thought, "he trusts me." That evening, she fed him herself, no gloves, no barrier, laying the fresh meat down and sitting beside it as he approached. He didn't snarl, didn't hesitate. He ate, slowly, and then turned his head, brushing against her arm once. Like thanks. Or maybe memory. As the sun dipped below the edge of the Kasara horizon, Emily sat outside his enclosure, fingers curled around a cup of lukewarm tea, watching the last light catch on his fur. It shimmered gold, just for a moment, then shadow, then gone, but he was still there. And so was she. Both changed, both scarred, both remembered. The first report came at dawn. A farmer's goat was found dead on the outskirts of Katala village. Just 5 kilometers from the protected boundary of Kasara Plains. There were no signs of a struggle. No blood. Just a body and a clean set of tracks, wide, deep, unmistakable. Leopard. By midday, radio chatter between regional patrols and local authorities filled the airwaves with growing tension. A second sighting, this time, from a group of schoolchildren walking home on the southern path. No injuries, no charges, just a pair of glowing golden eyes in the tall grass. By the time the third call came in, a woman claiming to have seen a shadow with spots moving near her fence line, fear had overtaken fact. And with fear came orders. The ranger station at Kasara was in chaos. Men and women gathered around maps, radios, printed reports. The regional wildlife liaison officer stood stiffly in front of a whiteboard marked with red pins, a line of printed warnings in Kiswahili pinned across the top. 3 sightings in 24 hours. He said, "We have to act before someone gets hurt." Emily stood near the edge of the room, arms crossed tightly over her chest, jaw clenched. She already knew where this was heading. A resolution was printed in the folder the officer slammed onto the desk. Predatory animal identified near populated zone. Containment or termination authorized if risk persists. Daniel leaned closer to Emily, whispering, "This is getting out of hand." "It's not him," she said, barely louder than breath. "Even if it is," Daniel said gently, "he hasn't done anything." But none of that mattered to the local councils. To the frightened farmers. To the young ranger who had overheard the radio call and was already checking the tranquilizer dosage on his dart rifle. Emily stepped forward. "This isn't a rogue predator," she said, steady but firm. All eyes turned to her. The liaison raised an eyebrow. "Dr. Hart, you've worked closely with the animal." "Yes. His name is Juma," she said. "He was rescued, treated, and rehabilitated under proper supervision. He has shown no signs of aggression toward humans, none. Even now, when wounded and surrounded, he never attacked." "You're suggesting this is that same leopard?" She nodded. "I've treated him twice, once as a cub 6 years ago. And again now. He's not just any leopard. He remembers human contact. He remembers me." "You're saying you have a bond with this animal?" "Yes," she said, voice unwavering. "And I believe he returned here not out of threat, but because he remembers this place as safety." Someone scoffed behind her. The liaison tapped the folder. Respectfully, "Doctor, memory doesn't change instinct. A leopard is a predator. And when a predator approaches a village, it's a matter of when, not if something happens." Emily's voice sharpened. "And what if the village pushed into his range first? What if we're not watching an intruder, but a displaced animal looking for his bearings? Still a threat." Someone muttered. Another ranger said quietly, "They're demanding action." Emily's eyes scanned the room, searching for even one person who would speak up. And then Daniel stood. "He didn't hurt anyone," he said. "We've tracked him for days. He walks wide around settlements. Leaves untouched livestock. Always backs away." The liaison frowned. "Do we wait until he doesn't?" Emily stepped forward. Her hands shook now, not from fear, but fury barely contained. "I'm not asking you to ignore the risk," she said. "I'm asking for 48 hours." The room fell silent. She continued, 48 hours. No rifles. No traps. Let me track him. Monitor him. Prove that he's not a danger. He's not some wild myth stalking the village. He's a sentient creature trying to exist in a shrinking world. The liaison crossed his arms. "And if he does something in that time, I'll be the one facing him," she said. "Not you." The air in the room tightened. Then she added, quietly, "He remembers me. And I remember him. There's no line between us. Not anymore." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Daniel stepped beside her. "I'll go with her," another ranger added. "I trust her judgment. This Leopard, he's not normal." The liaison looked around the room, the scientists, the rangers, the trackers, and found no echo of support for the termination order. He exhaled. 48 hours. He said, "No more. If the Leopard comes closer, we act." "Understood?" Emily nodded. "Understood." That night, she barely slept. Instead, she sat beside Juma's enclosure, watching him under the soft red glow of the solar lanterns. He stood still, listening to the sounds beyond the station: owls, insects, distant voices from the outer watch posts. "I've asked him to trust me," she said, her voice low. "But really, I'm trusting you." Juma flicked his ear but didn't move. He was stronger now, his legs stable, his stride returned. "You didn't come back here to hunt, did you?" No answer. But she didn't need one. At sunrise, she and Daniel set out, following the latest reported tracks, searching for signs of movement. Emily carried a tracker tablet, binoculars, a camera, and 2 tranquilizer darts as a last resort, not to use, but to show she came prepared. They found prints near the eastern road, fresh, large, but facing away from the village. "He's circling it," Daniel murmured. "Avoiding it." Emily knelt, pressing her fingers to the print, trying not to frighten them. Daniel looked at her. "Or trying to find you." By noon, they spotted him. Juma stood at the base of a rocky hill, watching from the shadows. He didn't flee, didn't growl, he simply waited. Emily approached slowly, hand outstretched. No fear, no hesitation. And Juma, Kisara's ghost, the leopard of stories, stepped from the rocks. Golden eyes calm. He stopped only feet away. Their eyes met. And again, that silence, not empty, shared. At the station, the liaison watched the live feed from the drone camera. He saw Emily kneeling, hand out. He saw the leopard step forward, bow its head, and gently, ever so gently, nudge her hand with its own. He said nothing, but he reached for the red file and closed it. The countdown had begun, but so had something else. Not fear, not folklore, but a fragile, feral piece, forged not by tranquilizers or traps, but by memory, by trust, and by a woman who dared to say, "There is no line between us." The sun fell slowly behind the savannah, casting long amber shadows over Kasara plains. The air, once hot and restless, now softened into the gentle hush of twilight. The trees stood still, even the birds seemed quieter, as though honoring the moment. Emily knelt just beyond the fence of the transitional enclosure, her field pack beside her, hands gloved and steady. Before her lay Juma, not sedated, not restrained, just there, stretched out on the grass like a silent guardian of the dusk. It had taken weeks of careful tending, of slow steps and wordless reassurance. But now Juma allowed her to come close whenever she needed. Tonight was no different, except for the weight of what the moment meant. He was healing. The wound on his foreleg, once swollen and festering, had reduced to a thin pink line beneath the last of the dressings. She had checked it every other evening, talking to him in soft, human tones he didn't need to understand to believe. And he had never swiped, never growled, never even turned away. Now, as she peeled the gauze gently from the bandage site, Juma only breathed. His eyes were half closed, tail twitching idly. Emily smiled to herself. "You're getting used to this," she whispered. Juma exhaled, deep and low, and then, in a movement so unexpected Emily froze mid-action. He rolled, slowly, carefully, onto his side, then onto his back, exposing his belly to her, soft and vulnerable, legs relaxed. His powerful chest rising with each breath. For a moment, neither of them moved. Emily felt her chest tighten. Not with fear, with wonder. This was no coincidence, no instinctive sprawl. This was trust. High in the acacia tree above them, the reserve's discreet remote camera caught every second, its night vision lens glowing as it recorded the great spotted cat lying on his back. Paws curled slightly, eyes calm, as a human kneeled at his side and touched the warm fur along his ribs. Emily, barely aware of the camera, reached forward. Her hand rested gently against his chest, where his heart beat strong beneath the muscle. Then, slowly, she slid her hand to the underside of his jaw, scratching. Just once, as she had when he was a cub. Juma's eyes fluttered. He rumbled. And in that simple, fragile moment, the great predator of Kasara purred. The next day, the video was reviewed by the drone monitoring team, standard data check. One of the technicians, a young conservation student from Nairobi named Kessie, watched the playback, her eyes widening as Juma flipped over. She rewound it, watched again, and then she shared it. First to the internal team, time-stamped and annotated, then, with Emily's permission, to a global conservation forum she followed. Within 24 hours, it was everywhere. The clip was just under 30 seconds. But it traveled the world. It showed a woman in dusty field gear kneeling beside a leopard twice her size, gently inspecting his belly while he lay like a contented house cat. The lighting, natural and cinematic, gave the scene an almost mythical quality, golden twilight, the soft breeze stirring Emily's hair, and Juma's spotted coat glowing like firelit stone. No voice, no narration, just the sound of breath and purring, and the quiet magic of absolute trust. The Internet, so often filled with outrage and noise, fell silent for a heartbeat, then erupted in awe. Wildlife experts, vets, journalists, and poets shared the clip under countless captions. This is what healing looks like. When memory bridges instinct, a predator, a human, and something bigger than either. But it was Emily's own words that echoed the loudest. In a statement she gave later that week, she wrote, "This moment wasn't about taming. It wasn't about ownership or control. It was about trust. Trust that survived fear, time, and pain. Juma remembers me, and I never stopped remembering him. This is proof that nature has memory, and that it has a heart." National Geographic picked it up. The BBC wanted an interview. One of the largest wildlife advocacy groups in East Africa launched a donation campaign in Juma's name to protect transitional zones between reserves and human villages, zones where most conflict and confusion occurred. They called it the Memory Line. Children in classrooms watched the clip and asked if leopards really could love. Conservationists argued in journals about whether this marked a shift in how we viewed large predators, not as unpredictable threats, but as beings capable of emotional bonds. And through it all, Juma remained silent, watching from his enclosure as the sun rose and fell, occasionally sitting near the fence when he heard Emily's voice, sometimes coming close enough to nudge her hand. 1 week after the video went viral, Emily stood in front of a group of conservation volunteers in training, most of them young, eager, overwhelmed by the enormity of the work ahead. She played the clip for them without introduction. When it ended, no one spoke for a moment. Then she said, "Animals are not data points. They're not profiles in a case log. They are living memories. And sometimes, if we're lucky, they remember us back." She paused, then added softly, "And when they do, we owe them the same grace." Later that evening, after the volunteers had gone, Emily sat once more with Juma under the early stars. She didn't bring a bandage this time. Just her presence. He lay quietly beside her, tail flicking. His leg was healing. Soon, too soon, he would need to return, fully, to the wild. They both knew it. But for now, he stayed. And so did she. Somewhere nearby, the camera blinked quietly. It had seen so much. It would see more. But this night, the footage was for no one. Just the stars. Just the wind. Just a woman and a leopard. In the middle of a world learning, slowly, how to love what it once feared. At first, the morning felt like any other. Golden light spilled over the Kasara plains, softening the edges of the savanna and warming the low mists that still clung to the grasses. Birds sang from acacia branches, their calls overlapping like a quiet choir. Rangers moved about the station, starting their day, checking supplies, scanning trackers, logging weather conditions. But when Emily opened the door to Juma's enclosure, she already knew. He was gone. The interior was undisturbed. No signs of panic. No forced exit. The gate, still locked, the perimeter intact. But there, on the packed dirt in the corner, was the unmistakable imprint of a wide paw. A single track. Clean, deliberate. And beside it, placed not carelessly but with a strange precision, lay Juma's tracking collar, unlatched, unbroken, as if removed, not torn off, not rejected, but left behind. A choice. Emily knelt and ran her fingers over the collar. The leather was still warm from his body. Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. Because this wasn't abandonment. This was something else. A message. He had waited until the night had grown still. Until the world had fallen into silence. And then he had left. Not in fear. Not in flight. But in peace. He had come to heal. He had come to remember. And now, he had returned to the wild. Daniel found her standing alone in the middle of the field behind the station. The collar cradled in her hands. He approached quietly, not wanting to break whatever moment she was holding. "He's gone," he said gently. She nodded. "Yeah." No signs of struggle. He just left. Emily looked out over the golden plains. The grass moved gently with the wind, flowing like water toward the tree line in the distance. "He was ready," she whispered. Daniel said nothing for a while. Then he reached into the canvas bag slung over his shoulder and pulled out a rolled document. "Wrapped with twine. I was going to show you this later," he said, "but I think now's the time." Emily turned. He handed her the document. She unrolled it slowly. It was a design, clean lines, warm colors, hand-drawn, a wooden sign, rectangular, simple, to be placed along the outer path near the eastern border of Kasara. At the top was a carved jaguar paw print, stylized and elegant. Beneath it, the words, "Placard Heart of the Savannah. A sanctuary for those who deserve to be trusted." Emily stared at it, a breeze catching the edge of the paper. Daniel smiled softly. "The team voted on the name last week. After everything, we want this to be more than a reserve. More than fences and rules. We want it to mean something." She kept her eyes on the words. "Those who deserve to be trusted. Not just animals. Anyone." The rest of the day passed quietly. There was no celebration, no grand farewell, only the soft, steady beat of life continuing. Emily packed away the last of Juma's medical records, logged his departure in the official file, and set the tracking collar on a shelf in the center of the field station. Surrounded by a small circle of White River stones. A makeshift shrine. Nothing more, nothing less. At dusk, she stood again at the edge of the open plains. The tall grasses swayed around her knees. She could hear the rustling of insects, the distant cry of a hawk, the creak of the old weather vane behind the ranger tower. She let her eyes follow the horizon, where the trees met sky, where shadows moved freely without name. And then, through the wavering shimmer of heat and wind, something shifted. A shape, faint, moving, a large figure, low to the ground, gliding through the golden light like smoke across glass. Spotted, silent, wild, Juma, or the memory of him, or the spirit of what he had become, more than an animal. More than a symbol, a story still walking. She didn't wave. She didn't call out. She just stood, hands by her side, heart still and open, and she let the silence speak for her. Above, a lone bird soared across the open sky, wings wide against the amber light, circling once before disappearing into the endless blue. Daniel stepped beside her quietly, his shadow long beside hers. "You saw him, didn't you?" he asked. She didn't look away. "Maybe. Or maybe he saw you." She nodded, almost imperceptibly. "He always does." Later, as stars emerged above Kasara and the wind cooled the plains, the station dimmed its lights and settled into rest. But on the eastern path, just beyond the ranger gate, a new wooden sign stood, hammered into the earth with care and purpose. It bore no camera, no electric fence, no rules etched in metal. Just words, a quiet promise, carved into cedar and softened by dust. Heart of the Savannah, a sanctuary for those who deserve to be trusted. And somewhere far beyond that sign, beneath a canopy of stars and wind and memory, the silence of the savannah carried the sound of something deeper than any roar. A story still unfolding, a bond still remembered.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.